and the locality where you live.
Hello, my name is Jamal Bickley King. I am the chairman, president, and founder of New Virginia Majority. I'm also Oliver Hill's grandson, and I've been doing political data for the last 20 years. I feel this bill, all of them, have missed the point. It was a racial gerrymander, and it was packing African Americans. And the solution from this body was race neutral. It makes no sense, none whatsoever. And so we went out there, and we're seeing there's a lot of, I would say, energy in this room about one side or the other trying to figure out what's the best path forward. And our organization has been organizing in those communities over the last 11 years. And we specifically target African American entities and voters. And in that, we just felt like all the maps forward just were not getting it done. They were basically kind of moved the chairs around and they still have the same room. And we feel like the room needed to be renovated, so to speak. Particularly when you're looking at it, because it was a race-neutral fix from both the Democrats and the Republicans. I think it was 7001 and 7003. Particularly, there was one we identified in the plan, Delegate Yancey's 94, and Delegate Price 95, where there was a split precinct, where it basically one half of all the black voters were in CS, and the other half the white voters were in Yancey. And that happened because it was a race-neutral piece. You can get the numbers lower, and you can get the numbers in a more fair map that's equitable for those communities. But you cannot do so by simply doing in a race-neutral manner. It makes no sense. It is possible to get those numbers lower. I know that for a fact. You can get them better. You can get more empowerment for those communities. We know that for a fact. I will not introduce legislation because my good friend told me he doesn't want that to happen. I can't have that power. I know the rules. But if you want to see a better map, we can provide that, or we can introduce one and maybe give you some ideas, because we know those communities. We've been in those communities. We organize in those communities. I am in one of those communities, Jeff Bourne's district. And we know it can do better, and it can do the power, and I don't think either of these maps do that. I think they both miss the point. And I can speak to that in some detail if you wish.
Delegate Rasul, do you have a question of the...
Question for the gentleman, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I can appreciate that you don't have an affinity for either 7001 or 7003, but very specifically, per the court's order, do you believe that because we're speaking to 7003, does that correct the situation where the voting power of African Americans has been diminished?
Absolutely not. It does not fix it. No.
I want to ask the gentleman a question.
Sure.
Delegate Jones.
What about 7001?
Neither that one either.
Thank you very much.
All right, does that conclude your comments?
I believe so. Can I come back if there's something else that address it?
Well, we'll see how much time. I don't know. It doesn't look like there's a mad rush to come speak to this. So
Everybody chill out. Only get a minute. But yes. So
I mean, if you've got more comments, you're welcome to continue.
well, specifically, I know that we were not introducing anything new, but in some of ours, we were able to delegate prices. We actually went through and we made a map, and we found a way to get. Basically, I think you had about 100 split precincts in your map, 7003 and 7001. We managed to get that down to 20 or 30 less. And for the record, we don't really care about it, but we feel like you guys felt very strongly about that. So we thought that we would go ahead and mention that. We also got her VAP down from 6140 down to 53.32, and just basically just naturally putting things together. Similarly, we have multiple.
Can I ask him a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So was that 95, 53 point?
Yeah, 53.32.
Do you think that was satisfactory?
Yeah, for our guiding star, we used basically what happened with Congressman Scott's district, where he went below 50, and we actually share with him that an upper 40 number still does preserve some level of African American voter power, and actually can be optimized at that level when it's just slightly below 50. Now, I know nobody wants to get into hard numbers because it is very much, there's an art and both science to this map making that is beyond all of us to some degree. But in doing so, you can go ahead and optimize for African American voting power instead of African American voting number, which was the chief mistake that was made in 2011, which led to this court case and this decision and why we're here right now.
So excuse me, so 53.3 is what you had?
Yes, 53.32%.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Rasul.
I yield to Delegate Price.
All right, Delegate Price.
Mr. King, so when you were saying the 53 number, percentage number, you just made a statement that I think you differentiated between African American voting power versus African American voting number. So I have a question in that is it possible to have two different maps that both get to 53 point something percent, but it matters where the African Americans were shifted to in order to get to versus a number versus voting power?
That is absolutely correct. I mean, there are some weird things where we do, like, of course, like prisoners are counted into those numbers and they cannot vote. That is a significant issue. And so and that number goes into the tally, but it does not mean they're not going to vote. But if you guys want to change that rule, I'm not going to fight you. So additionally, there are other things that you can do where you can kind of like put a critical mass of African Americans that are, likely to be moved out or aged out over the 10-year span, so that they slowly, even a course of the years, they end up dying out, and where you have like a retirement community in somewhere it's a highly transient area. All these things can get into effect where you go ahead and impact where African American voting number and power will differentiate, even if it's the exact same percentage.
Question.
Delegate Rasul.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, the question is there any way possible for us to alleviate the infirmities outlined by the court without looking at racial data?
I do not think so. I don't think that's possible at all. I think that is something that, while I think came from a good place and people trying to tip their hats to both the history of this space and this communities and stuff like that, I think that it's always challenging when you're trying to basically do something that pivots on one metric. But the key consideration here for everybody to understand is that the Voting Rights Act, which was there to help African Americans in 2011, according to this federal court case, and I would have to agree, has been weaponized against black people by finding ways of just pushing them into one area. And I don't think they did it because they hated black people or anything. I think they did it because in some way they thought that it would be best for them and their political chances. And we feel like there should be a paradigm and a piece and a communication around that doesn't take that in consideration, or at least is not the number one, second, or third consideration taken.
All right. All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. You have a good day.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Anna Scholl with Progress Virginia. I certainly can't speak as eloquently and knowledgeably about this as Mr. King can, but I would echo his remarks and concerns that I think we've been disappointed to hear throughout this process what seems to be an outsized focus on the partisan or political impact of a new map, on what it means for individual members or for political parties, political power or majority, as opposed to a focus on the voters who have been impacted by the map that the court struck down, ruling that it was racially discriminatory, and a focus on ensuring that those voters who have had their voices marginalized have their power restored in a new map. And I would echo Mr. King's concern and belief that it is extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, to rectify a map that the court has found to be racially discriminatory without looking at race. And I think that the split precinct between the 94th and the 95th district that he cited is a key example of that. That if a precinct was split with white voters in one district and black voters in another district, if you are attempting to remedy the map without looking at race, you are not able to see that and to remedy a clear action that took place to treat white voters and black voters separately. And I would hope that in moving forward, in making changes to a map and evaluating new maps, you all will prioritize the communities of interest that are present in these communities and making sure that their voices are maximized and heard, and that the remedy is best for them rather than a remedy that is best for you all. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Rasul.
Question for the gentlelady. Per the court's order, do you believe that any of the bills that are before us do a great job of correcting a situation where the voting power of African Americans and increases that where it had been significantly diminished before?
I'm not an expert on the subject, but from looking at them and evaluating in my own personal opinion, I would say no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? All right, we'll close the public hearing. The bill is before us.
Move to report.
There's a motion and second to report House Bill 7003. Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we vote, I think a couple of overarching points need to be made. I think my colleagues down the aisle here have done a pretty good job of explaining how messy this can get. And the last time we had a hearing, the point was made by the public that this is a great reason why we shouldn't be doing that. I have been here for 15 years. I have voted for every single bill that came before this committee to take it out of our hands, to let nonpartisan, bipartisan group do this. I know, so I don't agree fundamentally that we are the ones that need to fix this. So that's where I have a difference. I hope that the other side will support a constitutional amendment so we can fix this for 2021 coming up. We have to do it this winter. It won't happen. I don't think there's a court order here to maintain neutrality, political neutrality. That's not what we've been told to do. We've been told to correct the racial gerrymander. I thought 7001 did a better job of that because it did give more power to African American voters. But we hear from the audience, some experts today, that it wasn't good enough. So I hope that someone who doesn't have self-interest in this, if people get moved out of a district inadvertently on a fair, nonpartisan remap, they can decide whether they want to move or continue this service. I mean, these are not, the 43rd district is not my district. It belongs to the people of the state. And I think that we need to get our self-interest out of this generally. It's not a new position for me. I've had this position the entire time I've served. And I think the exercise we're going through now just demonstrates why we need to get it out of our hands. So I hope we'll vote no on this HB 7003.
All right, all those in favor of reporting House Bill 7003 will vote yes. So everyone voted? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, the clerk will close the roll. House Bill 7003 is reported 12 to 10. All right, is there any motion on 7001? All right, there's a motion to pass by 7001 indefinitely.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Sickles,
speak to the motion.
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think that if we're going to have a bill that people say they want to move here and have us do it, this is the one that comes closest to rectifying what the court has sent us here to do. So I would vote no on the motion to PBI.
All right,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Delegate Jones.
I would say that if your goal is to have a partisan gain, I'm really surprised my colleague is wanting a non-partisan commission in supportive of a bill that actually took partisan advantage in a situation of a court order. The bill 7003, there was a 1.2% difference, I think, in the change in black voting age population between 7001 and 7003. 1.2% total across 12 districts. So if it's partisan gain, and that's what you're after behind a court order, then I would suggest you vote no on the PBI. But if you want to move forward with the process to try to find a solution, please vote yes to PBI.
Mr. Chairman, can I reclaim the balance of my 2 minutes?
Delegate Sickles.
I'm not in a partisan game. This has nothing to do with that. We have a court order. I could read some of it to you about what we're supposed to do, and none of these. I think this bill before us is the closest one to doing what the court asking us to do, but I would vote that we keep it before the committee.
Mr. Chairman, is there any
Delegate
balance of
Price.
time? Thank you. I would just say that trying to get to a partisan neutral and race blind map is laughable in 2018, especially when African Americans in Virginia vote above 90% for a specific party. If the other side of the aisle wants to fix that, they should work on their messaging and outreach and not use it through racial gerrymandering. 7001 is the closest vehicle that we get to fixing to what the court asked us to do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Delegate
And again, I would remind them that 8 out of 12 are exactly the same. There's a 1.2% difference. And to Delegate Sickles' point, you went after members, combined them by design. So I call for the question.
All right, any other comments? All right, all those in favor of passing by House Bill 7001 indefinitely will vote yes. Clerk will close the roll. That bill is passed by. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The committee is adjourned.